Welcome to the Kratom Advocacy Podcast. My name is Lawrence, and today we're having a conversation with Joey Levin of Super Speciosa. Joey is the quality control manager of Super Speciosa, and his company was recently a part of an FDA single ascending dose study, which I'm really interested in and want to hear more about. Joey, if you could just start with your backstory, your history, and how you came to work with your company.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You're
We
welcome.
talked a little before this. I've been listening to every episode. I think you're doing a great job. So I appreciate what you're doing for the
Thanks, man.
industry. Really, I mean, it's a good show and it's important stuff. So, yeah. So I started with Super Speciosa around early 2020. I've been with the company now for about 4 years. I In early 2020, I was laid off from my past career, like many people were during COVID. And I was figuring out what was next in life. And I picked up a couple jobs. I was working as a waiter. I was doing some, side jobs. And I had a friend who had sort of introduced me to Super Speciosa, the brand, years ago. He grew up with our co-founders, Ken and Aaron. And they were looking for some people to help them out at their warehouse and with their company. And so they sort of just hired me part-time, and I learned everything that we were doing in our warehouse. I learned everything that was going on, with the brand, with the industry. And I just sort of picked up and really became fascinated by the product, Kratom, by the industry, by our company, by Ken and Aaron's story of how they started the company. And it wasn't something, to be honest, that I thought would necessarily be a long-term career, but working for them and seeing what we were doing as a company and what Kratom was doing in terms of like helping people and where it could go, I stuck it out. And then, as I learned more and more about the company and the industry, I think Ken and Aaron saw that I brought a lot of value to the company from the quality side of things, and it sort of grew from there.
So, were they already pretty big at the time when you came on?
Yeah, no, I think they were. I think probably I would say small, to be honest. That I think grew a lot during that COVID era. I think the industry probably grew a lot during that COVID era, and so we've definitely grown a lot over the last 4 years. Not, I wouldn't say because I showed up by any means, but it was definitely a lot smaller when I first joined on. And I wouldn't say that we're the massive company by any means, but it's definitely grown a lot over the last 4 years.
And what kind of opportunities existed back then during the pandemic that no longer really seem to exist? Because I've spoken with several vendors and they talk about that time almost like it's a mystical era where there was a lot of opportunity, whereas now it seems as though those opportunities are now narrowing, and your company's one of them. It seems that only some vendors are enduring.
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily was that. I couldn't tell you uh, definitively as much as our founders, are the guys who ran the company day to day back then, could tell you. To me, I don't know if it's necessarily that era was something. I think it's just that Kratom, it's so new in the United States. It's still such a new thing in the United States, and I just think that it picked up some steam around that time. And there was obviously a very loyal and hardcore consumer base, obviously based on what we saw in the past with the potential scheduling, and then it not being scheduled, and all of the outreach and outpouring of support from the Kratom community. But I think once people started to really see what the product was, I think like any like new supplement or new alternative product, there's probably this time frame where a lot of people try to jump in. But I think what you end up seeing is that it's not so easy to successfully run a business like this. So over time, I don't know that the opportunities necessarily go away, but I think the people who want to keep up with what it takes to run a company properly like this probably get less and less, and they maybe move on to other opportunities.
Well, you're a quality control manager, and I'm completely deviating from all the questions I emailed you. So
It's okay,
sorry,
no
but
worries. All good.
now it's all just coming to me. You're a quality control manager, and that's so interesting to me. It's a title I've not heard anybody have as of yet. Yet your position is obviously very prominent within the company. I want to know what your day-to-day schedule looks like and whether your duties include, because I know Super Speciosa has a pretty clean name, and I'm sure you have something to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot I have to do with it, but it's a company-wide ethos. You know, it's sort of one of those things where to 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 be a dietary supplement brand, distributor, manufacturer, anything like that, you have to uphold certain regulations. 21 CFR 111, most important, first and foremost, the federal regulations on good manufacturing practices for dietary supplements. So really, my day to day is making sure that our company is following and staying compliant with what the FDA says we have to do as a dietary supplement brand, which is following standard operating procedures, making sure that our manufacturing facility is doing things up to par, that our vendors are qualified properly, that we're testing our product properly, that we're complying with labeling requirements, that we're complying with different state requirements, because now with the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, there's different regulations in different states. So my day ends up being consumed with a combination of making sure that our employees are continuing to follow sort of the quality system that's been put in place, and also continuing to just make sure that everything from our brand, from basically the entire product life cycle, whether it's sourcing to marketing, that we're compliant and transparent, and making sure that people understand that we're doing things the right way, and that we have a safe and quality product.
Okay, and I think it's this reputation that kind of got you involved with the FDA through Dr. McCurdy. Do you want to talk about, you were part of a pretty important study conducted by the FDA, or you worked indirectly with them? Can you talk a
Yeah,
bit about
yeah.
how it started?
Yeah, so sure. Yeah. So the FDA, the FDA conducted their first ever human clinical study on kratom leaf powder. It was a single ascending dose study, meaning 40 people were split up into multiple cohorts and given servings of kratom leaf powder. And obviously, so the question was, how did we get involved? And then I can obviously explain everything about the study, but how we got involved was, a few years ago, probably back around 2021, there was another group. There was a group called the Kratom Vendors Association, and what that group was an auditor who had audited some kratom companies. She started an association that her intention was to get vendors and people from the science community and professional auditors together to help companies be more compliant with good manufacturing practices. One of the auditors who helped start that group had audited us in the past. She asked me to help with the organization. So I was on the board of that, and I want to say Soren Shade, who you've had on the show, was a part of it as well. And then there was a handful of auditors, and then Dr. McCurdy from the University of Florida, Chris McCurdy, and Oliver Grunman from the University of Florida were both a part of it as well. And through that organization, which now, for I think money reasons, sort of does not exist, I got to know them through that organization, through the meetings. And then after the fact, we just, I got the opportunity to just sort of meet with them every now and then and pick their brains about the science behind what this product was that I had been working with for only a few years, and that our company had been, selling for a few years, and the things that they were doing. And then they got a chance to sort of pick our brain as a vendor in the industry on what are we doing that makes our product a quality product? What are the things that we have in place? And also, what are the things that we do to sort of try to stand out, not necessarily even publicly, just internally? What are the things that we do as a company that we're continuing to try to evolve and make sure that we're evolving our product and the safety and the transparency of the product? And I think, through those various meetings and conversations that I had with them, I think they came to respect us as a brand, and they really got to get a really nice insight into like what we do and our commitment to quality and safety. And so through that, at one point, about a year and a half ago, Dr. McCurdy, I had sent Dr. McCurdy some of our powder before this, just to do some testing on it, just to get his thoughts, let him see our product. I think he was really impressed with our labeling is one thing, that's a big thing in the industry. I think he was really happy with the fact that we were, giving very clear instructions, giving the right warnings, the serving sizes, all those things that, is a hot button issue with supplements in general, but particularly kratom, and making sure that customers and consumers know what they're taking. And we also participated in a survey with Dr. Grunman. His specialty is more on the survey side, surveying consumers. He had done a survey of our consumers, so I think we built sort of like a trust there, that they knew that, or they had an idea that we were doing things the right way. They had seen our product, they had seen our powder. And then, I think about a year and a half ago, Dr. McCurdy reached out and he said, "We're working on a study. Can you provide us with X amount of kratom capsules, 500 milligrams each, with leaf powder? And can you provide us with the COAs for the capsules? Can you provide us with the COAs, the certificates of analysis, the lab tests for the capsules, for the powder, to show that it's safe and all that?" And to be honest, when Dr. McCurdy asked me that, we're happy to help them in any way they can, because I think those are the guys that are really have kept this industry going in a lot of ways with the work that they've done in the science community. So in any way, I always told them, any way we can help them, we're happy to help. So when he asked me for that, we provided them with, a few kilos with the capsules. And I just sort of, I didn't prod. He said it was for a study, and we just kind of went from there. And then cut to about, what was January? So earlier this year, at the International Kratom Symposium that they hold at the University of Florida, the FDA made a presentation that it was actually, the capsules were actually for their first ever single ascending dose trial. And they called out Super Speciosa and said thank you to them for providing the capsules. And I had an inkling that something like that was happening. I didn't know the full details, and I don't think they could provide the full details until the study was done. But yeah, it turned out that they used ours. And, the question of why us, I just think that over a couple years of built up trust, I think Dr. McCurdy felt confident that when he was asked to not only source the material for the study, but also do the testing for the study, which, by the way, the testing that they did on this product went far beyond what generally is tested for leaf powder. They were testing things, like they tested the leaf powder for residual solvents, which is a little strange. Why would just natural leaf powder have solvents? But the FDA wanted every single possibility ruled out. Now, to be clear, the way the FDA works is they contract out these studies to other companies. So the company that conducted the study was called Alta Science, and Alta Science contracted Dr. McCurdy and his team to source the kratom, test the kratom, and provide it for the study. So that is the long-winded sort of way of explaining how we got involved.
And what were the parameters of the study? What were the dosages? What were the findings? And were there any negative findings?
Yeah, well, no. So yeah. So I guess the most important thing is no, really, there was nothing negative. But to talk about what they actually did was, so they got 40 people. They had to have used recreational drugs in the past, but there was no one that had any past abuse issues or health issues. So they were otherwise healthy people who have used recreational drugs in the past. But 40 people, from my understanding, I think the largest human trial at that size of kratom to this point. And what they did was they split up the 40 people into multiple cohorts, and they gave them single doses of kratom leaf powder, starting at 1 gram and ascending all the way up to 12 grams. And then there was a placebo group. So the people in the study did not know how much they were taking. They didn't know if they were getting kratom or not getting kratom. And they were given 5 minutes to take the capsules. And now a little context on the capsules is the capsules that we provided for this study were 00 capsules. And if you know what capsules are, like, 00 are big gelatin capsules. They're pretty big, and each one has 500 milligrams. So you got to think 500 milligrams. That's 12 grams of kratom powder. That's 24 capsules they had to take at the highest dose in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's more than my grandma took.
That's what?
That's more than like my grandma, like when your grandma's 90 and she has the 30 pills on her counter.
I know.
Yeah, I don't even think she took that many.
It's yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of medicine that having to be taken before, but 24 capsules, whether it's the placebo, even the placebo group having to swallow that many 00 gelatin capsules is a lot. And I emphasize that because there was, the biggest finding of the study. So the people in the study were observed for 48 hours, and they went through a whole battery of tests, heart rate, physical exams, and monitored for adverse events. And there were the first things first, there was no serious adverse events, which would have been the number one stop. There was no stopping criteria, period, meaning nothing happened that caused them to say, we're shutting this down. And then no serious adverse events, meaning like death or hospitalization, anything like that. And not even any real severe, like major severe adverse events. And had there been something that was considered like a severe adverse event in, I think, 50% of any cohort, then they would have shut it down. The worst adverse event that they found in the study over the 48 hours through 40 people was that I think 4 or 5 people vomited. And so, first of all, people who consume kratom know nausea is a side effect of kratom. Especially leaf material.
12 grams. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Especially if you're taking up to 12 grams, and then you take into account you're taking 24 gelatin capsules and you have to consume them in 5 minutes. I think even, I'm sure you'll have Dr. McCurdy on here again, and he can expound on it a little more, but I think it's hard to say, did those people actually, so no one in the 1 gram group or the 3 gram group vomited. The vomiting only happened in the 8 grams, 10 grams, and 12 gram groups, which means they consumed between 16 and 24 capsules in 5 minutes. And that's what caused them to vomit. And so could it have been the kratom? Of course. But it could also just be consuming 12 grams or 8 grams of kratom and between 16 and 24 capsules in 5 minutes. So I think the result of the study is that that kratom leaf powder is well tolerated. And in fairness, our serving size is about 2.5 grams, and we suggest not more than twice a day, which is around 5 grams, which I think is a pretty common amount that people take. I wouldn't have known what was going to happen if I took 12 grams of leaf powder just from how it would make my body feel. I know you'd be safe, but just like that's a lot of material to take at once. And I think what they found, generally speaking, was that kratom leaf powder is well tolerated, even in extremely high doses. And what that also means is, in that 12 gram group, for people who understand the alkaloid profile of kratom, those people were taking, the people in the 12 gram group probably had around somewhere in the 120 to 140 milligrams of mitragynine and maybe 250 milligrams of total alkaloids in one, serving in a 5-minute span. So when you talk about upper limits of what is possible in terms of serving sizes and moving forward with studying proper serving sizes and dosing, I think that tells you a lot. That, like, obviously I don't think it's like saying, all right, tomorrow everybody can just take 120 milligrams of mitragynine, but it does say that in leaf powder, it's pretty well tolerated. There was no serious adverse events, and a few people vomited, some people got nausea, but overall it was overwhelmingly really, really positive results.
What does this mean for kratom in the future? Do you see this study being used to maybe justify a shift in stance in the FDA?
I would hope so. I think regardless, I think the thing is that there's probably, the FDA is massive. So there's probably people in the FDA who don't love kratom, who may not have even been aware this study was going on. It's such a big organization. I don't know. I hope that it leads to more studies that ultimately shifts their view. But I do think that it definitely signals that at least there are people in the organization being the FDA, that there are people who understand that banning kratom is not the answer, putting harsh restrictions, but finding what's right in terms of regulating kratom properly is the answer. And that kratom is, it's likely not going away anytime soon. And the best course of action, from federally speaking, is to figure out how to properly regulate. And I think this is the great first step. I think the next step is a HAP study, a human abuse potential study, which I believe they will do at some point. And I believe that also Johns Hopkins is working on their own version that Kirsten Smith is working on getting approved, and that I believe that the people at the University of Florida will also be involved in, at least helping her out and her team. And I think, that was one of the big findings in this study too, is that more studies need to happen. And this is the good first step. Like, what does this mean? It means now we know that in high doses, kratom leaf powder is safe to consume in a single dose. Now it says, okay, now let's find out what's next. What's the abuse potential? I will say in the study, they also found that there were no real indicators, the types of measures that they use for abuse potential, that they commonly use for abuse potential, like liking drugs or wanting more of a drug. They didn't really find any indicators like that in the study either, which I think is an interesting finding too, from a standpoint that kratom, again, kratom leaf powder, I'm not, we can't definitively say one way or the other, but I think that you'll find, based on what the science says, that the abuse potential is very, very low when it comes to that product. And so, yeah, I think it'll lead to hopefully policy change, but at least more studies that can lead us towards not only regulation, but also just educating regulators. I think that's a big thing. I think part of the problem with getting regulation passed in general is that the people that we're asking to regulate these products don't know what this thing is. So I think the more you can give them the data to say this product is this and this product is that and this product is safe and this product is not, clear, definitive answers to the regulators, it'll help. Because from what I can see, state to state, federally, when I watch these hearings and Kratom Consumer Protection Acts, the one thing that seems striking to me is that the people that are making these calls that we're asking to do the regulations don't really know what they're regulating. So I think this is a big step for the industry in terms of continuing to also help educate regulators on what we're actually asking them to properly regulate.
Yeah, it's a shame. All this good science is coming out, and most of it seems to point to the relative harmlessness of kratom. Because I was going to actually have the KDA on, and they recently backed out. I know they watched this show and they backed out because they just wanted the whole episode to be about the science of how kratom kills people, and just more and more, like, I don't know how you could believe that. But yeah, I'm a little bit still sore about that, especially considering I haven't really read any studies that are credible that point to kratom having any long-term deleterious effects on an average consumer. Have you?
No, I haven't. And I think from, what I will say is that I think definitely more science needs to be done on different types of kratom products. There certainly has not been any long-term
Oh, true,
studies
true.
that I think, but there certainly has not been any long-term studies that I'm aware of that show long-term negative effects. But that's what I think this will help lead us to, right? I think the first step is, getting studies like this on humans. First of all, there's plenty of science, I think, that we've seen on rodent models and things of that nature that show to your point, the relative safety of kratom products and metragynine specifically. And more studies are coming out about other alkaloids. But having a study like this on humans, I think, will lead to us now being able to do these more in-depth and longer term studies to show what, I think historically we've seen, even, in Indonesia and in places where they've been taking it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that long term, when taken properly, it's a safe product.
And I'm sure your opinion might be different on 7OH. I've had the isolate before, and it was an incredibly powerful experience, especially as I'm a prior, addict. It reawakened all those feelings. I'm not saying the product is bad, but I know right now a lot of vendors are anti 7OH. There are coalitions against 7OH, or at least for its severe restriction. It would be very easy for many of these vendors to just make a shit ton of money and then abscond. And it's half the people I talk to are like, "Yo, man, this shit is going to be illegal within a year." I don't know. I mean, when I had Ryan Adele on, he said this shouldn't be an experience that you should get to have at a gas station. I mean, I'm not saying that's true or false, but it seems like most of the industry is kind of against it. Now, 7OH people would say, well, that's because 7OH is superior for treating pain, and that is probably true. But for most people, that's just what I've observed. But what do you think about all this? What's your position?
Well, so I will tell you this: I've never tried a 7OH product. I've never tried a 7OH, a product that is, for example, the products obviously that you're talking about that are most prevalent right now are like the tablets that are, what is it's like something like 14, 15 milligrams of 7
Yeah,
hydroxymetragine.
sometimes 20. Yeah, 3 or 4 pack.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more of them. I will say I'm concerned on a certain level the proliferation of it, just because we don't understand it. We just don't. I don't think. I think look, I've seen some of the 7OH stuff out there, and I don't know the science that they're pointing to. I don't know that science. I take my cues from the scientists that have been studying these kratom for a long time, particularly like, the University of Florida, and they've publicly come out and said they're concerned with where this is headed. Now that being said, I'm not here to say that I think 708 should be like banned, and I
no, I
don't
don't
know
think
what
so either.
um I don't know, and I also don't know enough, and I don't know that anybody has the science to say this is what the limit should be or this is where it should stop. But I do agree with one thing. Well, there's a couple things but one thing I agree with with all the vendors that have issues right now that I seem to see is it should be labeled as what it is. Okay. So the issue I think that is happening in the industry and that a lot of kratom vendors are concerned about is that 7OH will hurt the kratom industry because a lot of these 7OH products that are coming out are labeling themselves as kratom, and they're not. They're 7-hydroxymetragine isolate, so to speak, products. They are not kratom products, and the reason they're not kratom products, at least from my understanding of the science, I'm not a 7OH expert, but my understanding, and I've seen this I have a database of thousands of kratom leaf powder samples. Okay. There is not enough naturally occurring 7OH, 7 hydroxymetragine in the kratom plant to extract, at least seemingly to me, to just naturally extract it and scale up a business to be profitable. There's just not enough. So there's something happening, right? There's some type of conversion happening where they're changing they're changing the natural plant into something that is not natural to the plant. I don't know that I'm not saying that I'm not saying it's synthetic. I'm not saying it's semi-synthetic. I don't know exactly what it is. All I know is that based on the data, which is there are when there is 7OH in kratom leaf samples, it is so little. There is such a little amount that even if you tried to do just a pure extraction with, let's say, a residual solvent of some sort, I don't even know that you would get 7-hydroxymetragine out of this leaf material because there is so little in there. So when they're being marketed as kratom products, they're not really kratom products because 7-hydroxymetragine is not a natural kratom alkaloid. That's so it's the difference between like a kratom extract product where you're extracting the natural alkaloids like the metragine and the other alkaloids that are naturally occurring, and the alkaloid ratio from the leaf material to the extract product is still the same alkaloid ratio. It's just a more potent, maybe in a smaller serving size, right? For example, like gummies or something like that, where you could take one gummy and have the same amount of metragine as a couple scoops of leaf powder, etc. but at least the alkaloid fraction is the same. That is kratom, right? That's kratom extract. The 7-OH products to me is not a kratom product because 7-OH is not natural to kratom. So what I will say is I think whether it gets banned or it goes away, I look, I don't think personally, and this is just me, and I'm not even speaking for my company here. I'm just speaking for myself. From what I've read, the studies that I've read on 7-OH, it seems like it could be potentially very dangerous, right? It seems like it could be misused. It seems like there's abuse potential there that doesn't exist with other alkaloids based on the studies that have come out. The scientists that I trust in the kratom space seem to share this opinion, and I've probably developed somewhat of an opinion on it based on what they say about 7-hydroxymetragine. So whether or not it's banned, I think the most important thing is that it's labeled properly, because another thing that the 7-OH industry, I guess you could call it, point to is that there's no adverse events reported on 7-hydroxymetragine. Well, why is that? That's because it's labeled as kratom, right? I mean, wouldn't you think, like, if products are labeled as kratom, people are going in and they're saying, well, I took kratom. They're not saying I took 7-hydroxymetragine.
Sorry to interrupt you. There's no database specific to 7-hydroxy. It's just all reported as, or mostly vastly reported as kratom.
Yeah, I mean, so the FDA has their adverse events database, and if you search kratom, or if you've gone to, like, people have databases that are searchable where you can search adverse events for any supplement, whatever. There are kratom adverse events. There are even some metragine adverse events, but there's no, at least from what they say, there's no 7-hydroxymetragine serious adverse events. But I would say part of that is probably a product of the fact that it's labeled as kratom. So if you really dug deeper into it, how many adverse events that are actually reported, that's first off, are reported properly, I'm not sure. So I think there's a concern there that the labeling, people see it as kratom. They see a product, oh, it's kratom alkaloids. I could just take the same amount of this as I would a regular kratom, and that can be dangerous.
Okay, and pivoting a bit, what's your opinion on the AKA?
I mean, we support the AKA. I think what the AKA has meant to the industry is sort of, it's hard to even quantify. I think there's a pretty strong argument to be made that the industry maybe doesn't exist if the AKA never existed. When you go back to, again, the possible scheduling back in the day, and the work that they did in rallying the support to get that schedule reversed. And I think even to this day, the work that they're constantly doing is invaluable. Working, like, I know that there are probably conflicting opinions on the effectiveness of certain Kratom Consumer Protection Acts state to state. And what I would say to that is, having read every single one of them to make sure that I'm compliant with every single one of them, and having watched the hearings that go into getting a KCPA passed, I wouldn't say that the inconsistencies in KCPAs is necessarily the fault of the AKA. I think it goes back to, it's difficult to get regulators. We have 50. We're in a country of 50 different countries, and everybody has their own government, and they can all make their own decisions. And this state wants this, and this state wants that, and this state wants that. And I think what they've done in from where we were, it's 2024. 8 years ago, this product was going to be a Schedule 1, right? Or I think it was scheduled. And now 8 years later, there are 13 states that have passed regulation, whether you agree with what's in it or not. That's the first step. Getting it in, getting it regulated on some level, and then improving upon it. Man, this isn't going to happen tomorrow. Look at how long the cannabis industry had to fight to get where they are today. And they're still fighting. And they're still going through all their problems. And they've been in this country around a lot longer than Kratom has. So I think what the AK is doing is super important. And I support what they're doing to continue to try to help consumers stay safe. And that's a hard job in this. And by the way, this is not just a a hard job in the kratom industry. This is a hard job in the dietary supplement industry, right? We talk generally about the kratom industry, but we are an industry within an industry. Right? We are the kratom industry in the dietary supplement industry, or at least that's what we want to be, right? We want to be recognized properly as a dietary supplement, which is what kratom is. And so this is not a unique issue to kratom. This is a dietary supplement industry. It's not easy to get industries to do things the right way. There are issues all across the dietary supplement industry. So the job that the AKA is doing to try to keep consumers safe by going state to state, by being that conduit between brands and consumers and regulators, I applaud what they've done up until this point and what they're still trying to do.
And what do you think about the Global Kratom Coalition?
I think it's I think with look I think that's sort of I think that's what kind of the $1 million question if you work in the industry right now. Look, I think that in a similar fashion, I think what the GKC wants to do, I support. I think they want kratom to be safe. I would think they want consumers to be safe. I get that it's now them versus them in some respects, like who,
maybe a little tiff going on.
Yeah, right. Like that. But I think the GKC is very new. The Global Kratom Coalition is very new. The AKA is they're the old dogs on the block, and the GKC is the new dogs on the block. And I think they have some differing views, but I think they're probably more alike than they realize. And I think at a certain point, they will get on the same page. And I think they're probably more on the same page even now than they realize. And I respect and I think in a way, the rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like, I think if they both continue what they're trying to do, which is keep kratom safe, keep it legal, and keep it safe for consumers, then I think even when they're not always agreeing, they're probably making each other better in a way, right? There's one group that's done a great thing for the industry, the AKA. Now there's this other group that is trying to have a footprint in keeping kratom safe, and they're doing it their way. But the fact that they're a little bit different probably causes them both to stay on their game, which is good for the industry. And look, in 8 years, the AKA has done a lot, but there's 50 states. There's 6 that still it's banned in. There's a lot of work to be done. So I don't think it just has to be the AKA doing the work. I think as long as the GKC continues to stay on a mission of keeping kratom safe the way the AKA has, I support both groups.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because the AKA is so formidable, but they're kind of like inscrutable to me sometimes. Like Mac the Wizard will come down, and I love Mac. I love having him on my show, but he'll speak his magic and then go off. The GKC kind of they just come and took me, like, yeah, sure, come sit in on some of our meetings and come see what's going on. So I think that they're doing something a little different, which I like as well. Some vendors criticize them because their 7-hydroxy restrictions are more stringent, from what I've heard or come to understand, than the AKA's. And the AKA says that, well, that'll interfere with companies' ability to, innovate or produce competitive 7-OH products, et cetera, et cetera. Have you heard similar things?
Yeah, well, I think part of it. So I think what the GKC seemingly wants is to come up with proper serving limits for the major alkaloids, including 7-hydroxymetragynine, which, as I've said, is not even really a major alkaloid, right? In the natural plant.
Yeah, of course.
So, to this point, the Kratom Consumer Protection Acts that have passed, that the AKA has worked on, they have the majority of them, other than maybe 1 or 2, like in Florida where I'm at. It's there's not a lot in the act. It's basically like no synthetics and an age limit. But in the states where there is a 7-hydroxymetragynine rule or clause, the rule is no more than 2% of the alkaloid fraction, which is a little bit of a weird wording, and it's strange, and it's sort of like it's hard to interpret. But I actually think that rule is fair. I mean, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, like 2% of the alkaloid fraction. So I think where people get confused, and where the confusion was that we saw in California recently, was that there's a group called the Heart Trust, that is the
Oh,
Holistic
yes.
Alternative Recovery Trust, who is
Enemies
this
of the bill.
yeah, well, so they are the advocacy group for 7-hydroxymetragenine, and their lobbyists came in and said, not only do we not want it to be in the alkaloid fraction, so the GKC was proposing 1% of the alkaloid fraction, which, look, 1%, 2%, it's a difference. I don't know if it's that huge of a
I think
difference,
it could
but
work with both.
yeah, I think both are fair. I mean, we put on our products that it's never more than 2% on on our powder products, we print how much 7-OH is in it, if there is any. If not, we put below the limit of quantitation in the testing. If it's a pre-printed label, we'll say that there's less than 2% of the total alkaloids fraction. And we have I'm pivoting a little bit here, but all of our products have a QR code on them. And I know a lot of companies do that, but ours actually goes for every single, it's a unique one on every product. And when you scan it, it goes directly to the lab result for that product. So it's not like a page where you have to like search for it. It's literally, if you get 250 grams of kratom leaf powder, you scan that QR code on that package, it's taking you to the lab result for that product. Plus we label the 7-OH and the metragenine on every package as well. But basically, sorry, I was a little bit of a tangent, but in California, what the Heart group was trying to do was not only raise it from 1% to 2%, but they were trying to make it weight for weight, meaning 2% of the weight of the total product, which that would be very concerning. Now that would be, again, so for context, for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm saying, if you had 100 grams of kratom powder, then 2 grams of that, 2 grams could be 7-hydroxymetragenine, which, by the way, is impossible in a natural product. So how are you getting 2 grams of 7-hydroxymetragenine in leaf powder? So I'm not necessarily against the GKC wanting stricter limits on 7-OH. I think until we understand what's safe, I think it's fair to have some type of restriction on it. And I think the AKA has put restrictions in the KCPAs to this point. I think GKC maybe wants it to be a little bit stricter. I've seen the 1%. I've seen them, wanting to potentially propose like milligram per serving limits. And I'm not necessarily against that either, but it has to make sense. And we have to understand what is that number and who is deciding that number. And who's coming up with the right number that this amount of milligrams per serving is right. If it makes sense, I'm okay with having that. And by the way, for those 7-hydroxy vendors, if they're selling in Georgia, as of January 1st, 2025, you can't have more than 1 milligram per serving of 7-hydroxymetragenine in Georgia.
Wow. Okay.
In their KCPA.
I did not know that.
So, it's going to be different state to state. It's hard to keep up with. It's constantly evolving. Georgia has some pretty interesting rules in their Kratom Consumer Protection Act that go into place next year. So, that's an interest. So we'll see. I mean, look, you can't get much more strict than that. That's pretty strict. I don't know that I necessarily even agree with that. Now, we don't have any products that have that much per serving, but I don't know if I even necessarily agree with that, because that's pretty strict, and I'm not even sure what that's based off of, particularly when you consider their allowance in their Kratom Consumer Protection Act is 150 milligrams of metragenine per serving. Pretty high. But anyways, so yeah, sorry, the long answer to your question is I'm not against having strict rules on 7-OH, especially until we really understand the safety profile of it, because it's still, I still don't think we really truly know how safe or unsafe it is as a product. One thing that we really need to understand as an industry is that if we're going to work to put these regulations into place, throwing a really big bill with a ton of rules at a state Congress can be a
Drugs
little
were
daunting.
simple creatures. Yes.
Yeah, it can be daunting for them because, like I said, they don't even know what they're being asked to regulate, and then you're saying, don't just regulate it. Here's 500 rules that you got to regulate. So I think it's coming together as as both groups, right? However you want to do it, and saying like, these are the most important things. These are the things that need to be regulated. These are the rules that we think are the most important to keep consumers safe. Particularly, like, look, I think again, if you asked Dr. McCurdy or anybody, any scientist, I think the one of the biggest things that they'll tell you is that we really, if you're going to get one thing passed in all these states, labeling requirements, labeling requirements, labeling requirements. The studies are happening. The FDA studies happening. Johns Hopkins, University of Florida, they're doing the incredible work. They're doing the things to prove that how safe kratom is. What we can do as an industry and what we can do to help regulations is label the product properly, inform customers how to take the product, how much of the product to take, how much to take in a 24-hour period, warn them, don't take it for this, don't take it if, and just give them the information they need to understand the product. And then I think that'll help keeping kratom safe, keeping it legal. And it also, I think labeling is something that even someone in Congress, whether they know what kratom is or not, if your focus is, hey, we want to make sure that this is labeled properly so consumers stay safe, that's hard to deny.
Any advocacy you're doing or goings on in the kratom world you want viewers to be aware of?
Personally, you know what? I just, I joined I sit in on the GKC meetings, and you know what? Like I said, we support the AKA and what they're doing. As a brand, those are the groups that I think we look to continue to advocate for consumers. And obviously, like just the work that we want to continue to help the science community in any way. I think as a brand, it was it was pretty incredible to find out that we were part of this. And I think it really validating to know that it's, like I said, it's not easy to properly run not just a kratom company, a dietary supplement company. It's not easy. And now that we've been a part of something like this that validated not only our sourcing, not only our manufacturing, not only our testing, not only our like all the things that we're doing, and maybe we had a part in keeping this industry safe for a little longer and push the science forward. I think those are the things that we would like to, I would love to continue to be part of those things, because that's really what's going to continue to help the industry evolve. I think one thing that just thinking about all the things I was saying about the study, like had our leaf powder tested, failed any test, maybe that's the ammo the FDA needs. Like maybe that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it doesn't even make it to the human study because they say, see, look, what we've been telling you, kratom's a dirty, dangerous product. We don't even, and it doesn't even get there. And maybe that's the ammo they need to say, you know what, just ban it, just ban it. So I think that was just extremely validating. And from that perspective, I would really just any way we can continue to support those groups and obviously the science community to keep evolving what we're doing. Obviously selfishly, it's great that it's our brand that was part of it, but from a bigger picture standpoint, it was just another day. When Dr. McCurdy hit us up and was like, hey, can you guys send us some capsules? I didn't go find our best powder. I didn't go find this special batch that's the cleanest batch and the cleanest capsules. We were running capsules that day. So I went to our team
Nice.
and I said, hey, we need to send some capsules to Dr. McCurdy. Those same capsules that were in that study, consumers bought those capsules, that same powder from us, and consumed that same powder. It wasn't like we cherry picked anything. We didn't, like I said, we weren't totally even aware what the study totally was. So it was very validating from that end. And I would love to be able to be part of this in the future. If they choose us, if they want us, we'd be happy to help in any way we can. And same thing with both the advocacy groups, any way we can help. I think the stories that I've seen, especially since some of our customers have found out about this study, some of the stories of the way kratom has helped people is just it's just amazing. I mean, look, I think that I'm like most people that are coming on here. I'm not going to come on here and say that kratom's this miracle thing and nothing bad can ever happen and nothing bad ever has happened. Bad things happen. But I've seen overwhelmingly positive with Kratom, particularly this. I see all of our our customers, they write to us, they send us emails, they complain. I see everything, the complaints, the positives, the negatives, and some of the stories that some of these people have sent us since they found out that this study happened, just how it put them at ease knowing like, hey, maybe this thing is going to stay safe and legal for the long term, because of the way it's helped their lives. For me, that's enough. Like that's the advocacy I want to make sure we help keep those people safe.
Me too. I go like back and forth between, oh God, it's going to be banned next year, and hey, maybe we'll make it. Thanks for helping us make it.
I think I'll tell you, I think that's one thing that this study, at least I believe that it would be really hard for the FDA. Now, again, there are leaf powder products, there are extract products, there are 7-hydroxy products. So there are a range of things out there. But at a minimum, I think it would be hard for the FDA now to say kratom leaf powder is banned, right? Without doing way more. So I think this study does help us get over a hurdle of, hey, is kratom leaf powder safe? Now we need to do more studies on it. We need to understand more about it. But it would be hard in the short term for the FDA to just come out and say, nope, kratom's banned fully. Like, how could they do that? They are the ones who've done the biggest human study to this point, and it showed that it was well tolerated. So
I think it's a very auspicious sign. And to close, what's one book that changed your life?
Oh, I had a feeling you're going to ask that question because I do listen to this podcast.
It's just becoming my thing now.
So, look, I'll be honest with you. When I was younger, I was not a big reader. I read more as an adult,
Sure.
but I'm not. I was one of those raised by TV kind of kids.
Me too.
But I will say this. I'll give you a book. I could give you a book actually because look, I don't know that I have a book that like changed my life. But I can give you a book that really affected my life that I read recently. And it's not probably going to be a book that that's similar in any way to any book that anyone on here has given you, but let's see how we feel about it. There's a great poet named Action Bronson. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out with a book called Fuck It, I'll Start Tomorrow. My whole life, since I was pretty much a teenager, I have had extreme ups and downs with being healthy, whether it's eating too much, being lazy, drinking in college, drinking after whatever it is. I go through these ups and downs. And last year I was going through a lot of family stuff. I had a lot of stuff going on personally, and I got big. I got real heavy and real unhealthy to a point that I hadn't at that point. And generally when I was younger, like in my 20s and whatever, I was grinding, burning candles on both ends, and I could just snap out of it and lose the weight or get healthy or whatever. But I'm an old man. I'm 37 now. So you can't do that your whole life where you go up and down, up and down. And, I picked up that book last year. And for people who don't know, Action Bronson is a rapper, painter, chef. He does a little bit of everything. But at one point, he was like almost 500 pounds. And he has become like this fitness freak, and he's lost hundreds of pounds, and he's dedicated himself to being a healthy person. And he wrote a book called Fuck It, I'll Start Tomorrow. And when I was really at like sort of a shitty point last year, I read that book, and it wasn't the only reason that I, dedicated myself to getting back in shape and being healthier, but it was really something that got my mind in a positive place. It's like it's like a memoir / self-help type of book where he talks a lot about his childhood, and he's 40. So we're around the same age, grew up around the same era. So a lot of stories that I really connected to. And then also like, I think at some point in our lives, everybody says, you know what, fuck it, I'll start tomorrow. And I know for sure, like when I'm unhealthy, when I just ate a whole bag of chips or something, I'm like, yeah, no, you know what, I'll just finish this and I'll just start tomorrow. I'll start being healthy tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he just talked about how that mindset, almost killed him. He was huge. And now once he was able to snap out of the fuck it, I'll do it tomorrow mindset, he was able to change his life and get healthy. And it really put my mind in a positive spot. It was a really easy read. It's a short book, which for someone who doesn't wasn't always a big reader. Short books are good. And it was just super entertaining, and it helped put me in a positive place where I was in a pretty negative spot last year with a lot of things that were going on. So yeah, fuck it, I'll start tomorrow. That's my book.
Fuck it, I'll start tomorrow. Joey, thank you so much for such a cool and inspiring story. Thank you for telling us about your company and your role in the study. It was so cool having you on. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Lawrence with Super Speciosa, Kratom Advocacy Podcast, signing out.